presence here as a non-believer, non-religious?
No, I do believe.
No, that means that you're not limited to Abraham.
May peace and God's blessings be upon you all. My name is Aziza Hassan, and I serve as the Executive Director of New Ground, a Muslim-Jewish Partnership for Change. For me, there's two reasons why Interfaith. The first is inspiration. I, just like Jihad, have a Christian mother from the Midwest. She's here in the front row. You can see her with white hair. My father is Palestinian, and I was born and raised in Amman, in Jordan, for the good beginning parts of my formative years. And I remember growing up in a space that, yes, raised us Muslim, and I attended all of her different church going out into community in lots of different forms. And I attended all of the services at the mosque and did the 5 daily prayers with my dad. But more than anything, what really seared into my being was watching my mom out in the world doing philanthropic work. Why? Just because it connected back to her faith. We were constantly doing charitable work over the weekends and at special events. Going to orphanages and asking questions of like, oh, there's deaf kids? Oh, they're human, just like me. And seeing this really integral, important moment that happened just through experience, by seeing people that I'd never actually seen before. And then for my dad, it was literally refugee family, so he was constantly out working to make sure that family members had what they needed in terms of skills and assets, and giving back in another sense, which is to give to the people who are closest to you. And just being in part of that has helped me want to tap into why doing good in Islam is so important, but also it inspires me to be better. And I found that I was inspired by both my father, who was Muslim, and my mother, who was Christian. In the same way, I find myself inspired by the people on this panel. Rabbi Beliak has this passion for social justice. Bishop Gilliland, you've heard his story. He fasts during Ramadan and has fasted for several years now. You hear Rabbi Mel Gottlieb. He connects to the text and he loves it and he appreciates it. And Jihad's devotion to thought leadership and mentoring more Muslim leaders to have their voice, to have their rootedness in religion. And Dr. Stenizai to reach to the inner soul and be spiritual and to truly connect to what is the Almighty. Like, that all inspires me in great ways. And especially also here at IMAN, like, you bring together people from many different faith traditions all the time, and it's a space that's open to people. As New Ground, just a couple of months ago, we had people in this very room, sitting in the very chairs that you're sitting in, for a show called More Courage. So Muslims and Jews filled this beautiful hall, and we heard stories done by professional actors that were true stories of Muslims and Jews tapping into their courage and really being there for each other, for their friends, for their families, because sometimes we think courage is something that other people do. There's no way I could rise to that occasion. And yet there are little pieces of courage that we all flex our muscles and work through every day. And at the end of this beautiful show, we had people in the audience ask questions and answer questions on if there was a moment that demanded courage, what do I need to stand up in the way that I want to stand up? And in that way, we can be inspiring towards each other. And so that leads into my second reason, which is completely pragmatic and practical. So we start with the inspiration, but we are about to become a minority-majority country. And there's another source of inspiration right here.
Oh.
Reverend Alexi Smith.
Alexi, that was a promotion.
If you ever want to see the cathedral downtown, Reverend Alexi Smith is just an incredible guide and also very inspiring. So we're about to become a minority-majority country by 2043. You would never know it considering the rhetoric that we're hearing on our airwaves. But if we're going to have a minority-majority, think about it. We have to be working really hard right now for pluralism, for appreciation of diversity, for seeing each other as assets and lovers of community and creating spaces that build instead of take down. And so for me, interfaith are the building blocks of what it means to build a thriving democracy and what it means to be there for each other so that we can stand up with courage, we can stand up grounded in our faith and also appreciating and growing by the inspiration of the people around us.
At this time, I want to give some time to Father Rabbi Alexis to settle down a little bit, but I have a special guest here for a few minutes. He's going to talk to us about the big undertake that is being done by the Iranian community in Century City on 4th of July as a gift of the Iranian to American people. My dear friend, and I can call him my brother, because we share the same mother, Mr. Muhammad and me.
You can have my seat.
I was counting on that to show up. Well, Dr. Namazikha, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. It was kind of like last minute, and he agreed to break this up to give me a chance to talk. First, I just want to say this is really amazing. And today, where all you hear in the news is about different faiths and religions fighting each other around the world, and to see that this kind of mindset exists, and I know it exists, but to be brought out, I just wish that this would someday overwhelm that, segregation is part of the faith. Having said that, quite interestingly enough, there's this huge poster of Cyrus Cylinder here, and I'm sure all the Iranians know about it. For those of you who don't, it's literally considered the first declaration of human rights. Now, it's not a declaration of human rights in a legal language, but it was written 2,500 years ago by a Babylonian priest at the behest of Cyrus the Great, after he conquered Babylon. And the reason it was done because, he was literally the first conqueror in history, the first emperor to provide freedom of religion, to free all the slaves, and not to sack and loot the country that it just conquered. Prior to Cyrus, it was pretty much standard operating procedure. If you conquered the country, you would rape the women, loot the homes, kill all the fighting aged men. And there was logic to all of that, because you didn't want to have somebody left behind to fight you, because the soldiers had been fighting for months, without any reward. So, and he managed to administratively deal with all that stuff. And of course, the most famous part of it is that he's mentioned in Torah as the liberator who, freed the Jews who had been kept as slavery in captivity in Babylon, and gave them back their belongings, especially, the valuables from their temples, to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild their temples. But it wasn't just the Jews, he freed all slaves. And he did use slave labor to build his monuments and stuff. There's records that are discovered now of every palace that built, including Persepolis, the picture is there, was built with paid labor. They've actually dug up the accounting records of how much each laborer got paid. So because of that, he is, and by the way, a replica of this sits at the Hall of United Nations as literally the first Declaration of Human Rights. This particular cylinder was discovered in an excavation in Iraq about, I think 180 years ago, and right now sits at the British Museum. What happened was about 5 years ago, British Museum allowed to lend this Cyrus cylinder, which is only about the size of an American football, to be brought to Los Angeles, among other cities. Me being part of Farhang, which is a non-profit dealing basically with Iranian culture in Southern California, we raised $250,000 to bring this here and it was housed at the Getty Museum. I'm sure some of you went and visited it, and it became the most successful traveling exhibit ever to be brought in Getty Museum. That inspired us to give us an idea about whether we do something more with it, and we came up with the idea of actually creating a monument. But we didn't want to create a monument to Cyrus, we wanted to create a monument to his ideas. And we had an international competition with a $300,000 prize for artists and architects to create a sculpture that would be inspired by Cyrus Cylinder. And a very successful and famous architect by the name of Cecil Belmont in London, he won that competition. We had an international jury, very well-known jury, to pick the winner. And we set out to build this in Los Angeles. And luckily enough, we got amazing support and reception by the city of Los Angeles, from mayor to council people. And they gave us literally the most expensive and best real estate in Los Angeles to install it, which is in the middle of Santa Monica Boulevard, right at the intersection of Century Park East. For you guys familiar, that's probably one of the widest streets in Los Angeles. That median is about as wide as half of this hall. And the sculpture is going to be about 16 feet tall and 20 feet long. So it's not something anybody can miss. If anybody drive right now by there, you will see it's boxed in. We finished installation about a week ago, and it's boxed in, so you cannot see it. So the reason I'm here is on July 4th, which is Independence Day, we are having an unveiling ceremony of the, it's called Freedom Sculpture, of the Freedom Sculpture, July 4th from 5 to 9 p.m. It's a free event. We're going to have concert. We're going to have Eddie and Arash and some American musicians as well performing. And it will be a party, it will be a ceremony, there will be food trucks, food stands. It will culminate with fireworks. So it's really a July 4th celebration. And at that time, you will see the unveiling of this cylinder. So I'm here to invite everyone to attend. It's a free event. The Santa Monica Boulevard from Wilshire all the way to Avenue of Stars will be closed. We expect about 20,000 people. The more, obviously, the better. So I'm asking you to please come as our guest, but also spread the word, tell everyone you know to come. And the one more thing is that this thing, as usually happens with this thing, the budget has ballooned way beyond our expectation because the unveiling event became much, much bigger. Just to give you an idea, the security bill for the security alone is $130,000, especially after what happened in London. We have to put cement barricades, hundreds of guards and police and fire and everything. So it's become out of really, really a lot more than we thought. So we are borrowing money. So we have a fundraising. And our fundraising is a website called freedomsculpture.org. You can just Google Freedom Sculpture and it will come up if you forget .org. And so far we raised about $2.2 million. We need to get that to $3 million. And more importantly, over 1 million people from around the world, from practically every country, will have donated to this. So we are not only looking for more money, but more importantly, we're looking for as many donors as possible. So it's important for us, the number of donors is really, really high. That's almost more important than the amount of money, because we don't want this to be perceived as just a very few people. We want this to be a truly international, multi-ethnic, multi-religious effort. So if you could just go to that website and donate, even if it's $1, it really means something because it will increase the number of people who are donating. And of course, the more money you can donate, the better, because we are underwater. And I just want to thank everybody for their time, for giving me this time and Sorry for interrupting your program.
This is not your honorarium.
First check.
Okay. Father Alexei, it's your turn. You have to guess the question.
Guess the question. Well, okay. Thank you. I apologize about being late in arriving and coming dressed like this. I've just come from our cathedral downtown, where I think I'm Catholic. You know that the Catholic Church, or maybe you don't know, the Catholic Church has not always been interested in things interfaith. For many, many centuries, we thought that we were the sole possessors of the truth. Everybody else was wrong in some way or another. We alone knew what was true. And then in the 1960s, Pope, now in our mind Saint John the 23rd, summoned the Second Vatican Council, which promulgated a wonderful document called Nostra Aetate, in which the Catholic Church made which for us was a startling declaration that there is truth in other religions, truth in non-Christian religions as well. And that began the Catholic Church's endeavors in the whole interfaith movement. And I think what I've just come from at our cathedral evidences that. Today we were celebrating a mass or a religious service highlighting the contributions of all immigrants in the United States here. And we had a number, I was invited by the Archbishop to bring a number of our interfaith partners to be present there, to bear witness that the whole struggle for immigrant rights and such is not a Catholic issue, it's all of our issue. And so we stand together there. And we had representatives from some of our brother and sister Christian churches. We had a Muslim representative, we had a Hindu representative, we had Buddhist representatives, all of us working together for the greater good of society. In my opinion, interfaith relations not only focus on theological questions, where we dialogue with one another, we learn from one another, or where we stand on certain theological issues, but even where those areas are different, or where we differ, we are able to set aside those theological differences to work together for the betterment of society. And I think that's what's so violent, I didn't even say violently, but so importantly needed right now. The visual image, as you were saying, the visual image of people of various faiths coming together, wanting to learn from one another, experiencing one another, putting a face on each other's religion, so that people can't paint with this wide strokes all the time. All the Muslims do this, or all the Mormons do this, or whatever. You can't do that. You can't do that. We have to look at each individual, and we have to look at and have to acknowledge that each individual is made, we are all creatures of the same God. That's probably enough for me for right now.
Thank you. Okay, there's no question what there are a lot of violence is going around the world. I don't know if you read the news in Myanmar. You read the news. In Myanmar, Muslims are being massacred. The head of the children are being chopped by the Buddhists. The body of the people still alive are being burned. This is Buddhists who are supposed to be a peaceful religion. In the Muslim world, we have ISIS. A lot of people call them Sunni, and they think that's a result of the Shia and Sunni conflict. No, that's not true, because that's a different religion. In this panel, except Dr. Stanzai, the other two people are Sunni, and I'm Shia. We didn't invite the Shia here. That's how much we respect each other. The Shia and Sunni don't have problem. And the new issue is Wahhabis, that they are creating the ISIS, Al-Shabaab, and Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and all of these terrorist groups are the followers of the Wahhabism. And the other thing is that, unfortunately, some Muslims in Palestine, they go and they bomb the loss of the innocent children of the Israelis. At the same time, Israel bombs the school of the children in the Palestine. And the Christians did a great job in the Bosnia-Herzegovina. And we can see that every religious hand is polluted with the other people's blood. My question is, where did the whole thing go wrong? We start with jihad.
All right, great.
Palestinians.
Is it because, it's not because of my name, right? No. So I actually have an answer to this question that is satisfying to myself. And when I went to do my graduate work at UCLA, I was just 2 years into my PhD in Islamic studies when 9/11 happened. And so, you know, my focus still remained on studying medieval Islamic philosophy and theology and jurisprudence. But I took a lot of extra courses, almost double the number of courses I needed to for my PhD, in trying to answer this question for myself. What went wrong? Like, why is religion in general and Islam in particular being instrumentalized to justify violence and these great criminal acts of murder around the world and here, even in the United States? So I'm going to start with the answer and then fill in the blanks a little bit as to why I think that what's going on is going on. And the answer is going to seem unsatisfying to you at first, but I'll try and support it a little bit. So I would argue that what really is going on, for the most part, around the world, is that what you have is competing nationalisms, and oftentimes ultra-nationalisms, that have as part of their nationalist identity some affiliation with religion. Let me put it differently. There's a very famous continental philosopher named Foucault, who describes modern nationalist identity, which is the foundation of the story that we tell ourselves as we belong to different nation states, the story that we tell ourselves about who we are as a people. And forget about America just for a moment, because we're a little bit more complex and nuanced, and we're founded on ideals and values like freedom, etc. But if you go to most other countries in the world and look at Europe as an example, because that's where it all started, you find that most nation states are monolithically, they belong to the same, they have the same nationalist identity. So I think follow me, what Foucault said is that there are 5 elements to a modern nationalist identity. You have the issue of your ethnicity. So there's the issue of ethnicity or race. You have language, you have culture, you have an attachment to a particular piece of land, and yes, you have religion. Now, most nation states in the world, they have a unified nationalist narrative where those things are monolithic for the most part. And where you have political violence or violence in the name of religion or something else is where you have competing nationalist narratives within the same borders, within the borders of the same nation state. So let's take, for example, the Basques in Northern Ireland, the Basques in the Pyrenees in Spain. The Basques, they are all of the inhabitants, for the most part, of both Spain and the Basques, they're Catholic. And so Catholicism is not the dividing line. But for years, for decades, the Basques were waging a terroristic warfare, irregular warfare, blowing up, cafes and the whole thing, just, what we think of terrorism, in an attempt to win their autonomy as their own nation state. Now they would say, listen, we're all the same religion, but we differ in the other 4 areas. We speak Basque, we have our own culture, our own language, and history, and our own territory, which is the Pyrenees. Whereas the Spanish considered it part of their territory. And so that for many decades they were waging this war. And only about 6 or 7 years ago did they finally give it up. Another place outside of the Muslim world, and then we'll go into the Muslim world, you have the issue of, not to pick on the Catholics, but Northern Ireland, right? You have Northern Ireland where here's the opposite. They were all Irish. They spoke Irish, they had the same culture, the same territory, the same history. Where are the different religious lines? And so, but they saw themselves as two different peoples. Why? Because they're sort of ultra-nationalistic, or their nationalistic narrative divided them into two different camps, and each camp, each tribe wanted control of the state, because with this control of the state comes all kinds of benefits, financial and otherwise. And so you had this competition for which tribal group, and granted, would have power. And they would resort to terrorism or brutality, one side or the other. And let me just be very clear. It wasn't the Protestant values that were behind the brutal, iron-fisted rule that they had there, nor was it Catholic values that justified the acts of terrorism. I was invited to one of the Catholic churches in Los Feliz, and I forget his rank, but he was pretty high up, who introduced me, said, before we have our Muslim brother speak here, let me just remind you of Northern Ireland. And he spelled out that same story. He said, this is not justifiable by a religion, yet people in our name were carrying this out. It's not that they were inspired by religion. So the narrative in the media is religion is the dividing line. And as Dr. Maziha pointed out, it's not religion. Look, we're all here getting along, kumbaya, it's great. What's really going on in the other parts of the world is this ultra-nationalist divide. Now let me take it into the Muslim world and break it down for you to give further evidence, and I'll finish shortly. Let's look at Iraq. Who are the three groups fighting in Iraq? You have the Shiites, you have the Sunnis, and you have the Kurds. What religion are the Kurds? And if you notice, the media doesn't talk about their religion. They're Christian, right? No, they're not Christian. They're Muslim, they're Muslim. What are they, Shiite or Sunni? Because Shiites are Muslim, Sunnis are Muslim. So Kurds are Sunni. All right, raise your hand if you knew already that the Kurds were Sunni Muslim. Okay, raise your hand if you didn't know that. All right, most people didn't know, and some of you didn't raise your hand, which, All right, it's Ramadan, I'll give you a pass. All right, so here's the thing. The media doesn't know how to cover it, because their narrative is, this is all about religion. Who is the leading edge of the fight against the ISIS and the Sunni Arabs? It's the Sunni Kurds. They're the ones who are on the front line, for the most part, in fighting against the Sunni Arabs in the western province, Anbar province of Iraq. So it's Sunnis versus Sunnis. The news doesn't know how to cover conflict that involves different nationalist identity groups that identify oftentimes by their religious identity, if the conflict isn't about religion, because they're both Sunni here in this case. And you can make the case, as Dr. Maziha, well, one is more influenced by Wahhabism, or I would say it's in part, yes, Wahhabism, but really it's not even the Wahhabi ideology, it's Arab nationalism under the cloak of Wahhabism or some other kind of extreme ideology. But what it really is we are Arabs, and we used to be under Saddam power over Iraq, and now we're under democracy. We're only 20% of the population, and we are marginalized. We want that power back. And then you have regional powers like Saudi Arabia, who wants to, and the Gulf countries, and I'm just going to call them out on it. I'm on record here. It's all right. It's all good. Who are fearful of the influence of Iran. And so what do? They infuse funding and weapons into the Sunni Arab minority to give pushback to the influence of Iran. Why? Because in Saudi Arabia, which is a predominantly Sunni land, 15% of the population is Shiite. And where do they live? Over where the oil is located. What do they not want to have happen? They don't want the Iranian revolutionary zeal or influence to have that group of people rebel and take with them the property that has the oil with it, which is their bread and butter. So they became, from the time of the Iranian Revolution in 1979, vehemently anti-Shiite. Not for theological reasons, I would argue, but for political reasons. We're following a scandal in the White House these days, and I was watching the CNN documentary on the Nixon scandal, and one of the famous lines that permeates our culture now is, follow the money.